Good evening and welcome to Mushing Radio coverage of Iditarod 2018. This is day 8 since the restart. My name is Alex Stein and I am here today co-hosting with Michelle Forto, who is the host of Dogworks Radio's The Daily Dog Show. Michelle, how's it going?
It's going great. You know, I got an early start today, and you are my last job on the list, and I'm looking forward to our show tonight, Alex.
Me too. You are listening on Mushing Radio. You may be listening to the podcast, which is available anywhere you get your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Podcasty, anywhere you go to get podcasts. And we would appreciate you subscribing. Just search for Dogworks Radio. You also may be listening to our live broadcast on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley, Radio Free Palmer. And we are here every night during the Iditarod. And it is shaping up to be kind of an exciting race. We have the top 3 teams are now on the coast in Unalakleet. Nick Pettit got in around 1 o'clock, 1:30 this afternoon, followed by Mitch Seavey a couple of hours later, and Your Olsum just got in a few minutes ago. So we have those guys in the lead. Then we have a fairly large chase pack coming after them. About 15 miles back, we have Travis Beals, Ray Reddington Jr., Wade Mars, Pete Kaiser, Richie Deal, Linwood Fielder, Ramey Smith. And then about another 15 miles behind that, we have Ali Zirkle, Aaron Burmeister, Mats Peterson, and Cadel Retton. So we have a lot of people who are either on the coast or will be on the coast a little bit later tonight. And as we always talk about, the races can be thought of in terms of approximately thirds. There's the first third where you go over the Alaska Range. There's a long middle third in the interior and the Yukon River. And then after the portage from Caltag, there's the last approximate third of the race where you're just going up the Bering Sea. And that's really a different race with different strategies than the first 2 thirds, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially in the past years, they've been having to go through Fairbanks and on that northern trail, so this is the first time they've had to do the southern route in a while, and, you know, I'm not hearing a lot of what's going on with the trail conditions now that they're past the Alaska Range, or nearly past the Alaska Range with everybody, but here in our neck of the woods, the trail is holding. We've had some beautiful snow, some beautiful weather. We're dealing with overflow issues, but otherwise it's been great.
Yeah, and I know that there was in the middle of the race, there was a big storm that blew in, and it kind of separated Jeff King from the leaders. Jeff King was right up with the leaders, and then he got caught behind that storm, and it really dropped him considerably far back in the standings. Before I forget, I just wanted to mention that we do have one additional scratch, which was actually yesterday evening, I believe. Robert Reddington scratched at Shagaluk, and that is now where the back of the pack is. So the 3 mushers who are sort of bringing up the rear in this race, Tara Cicatello, Steve Watkins, and Tom Schoenberger are all in Shagaluk right now.
Okay, so what I'm looking at must not have been updated on the Iditarod.com website. You know, Robert and I don't pay for the additional package, so it still shows Schoenberger in Iditarod.
Yeah, I think he just got in a couple of minutes ago.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it looks like that storm really set Jeff back. I mean, he's in 34th place.
It's pretty much, for most of the race, been Nick, Mitch, and Yor, but he was close behind them, and then they kind of moved ahead of the storm, and a lot of the pack just got pushed back many hours, and some of them have been able to make up a little bit of that time, but really Jeff and some of the other racers, some of the other teams were really caught behind that and therefore are far, far behind. There was an article I wanted to just swing into this by Jake Berkowitz talking about the different ways that Nick Pettit could win this race. And the entire theme of his article, which is on the Anchorage Daily News, is that we are going to have a new champion this year, and most likely it is going to be Nick Pettit. And since Nick is now in Unalakleet, and Unalakleet is very well known for having great hospitality. Mitty Johnson, who I believe was the mayor, maybe still is the mayor, and also ran the Iditarod a couple of times. He's sort of in charge of the hospitality. They're famous for baking pancakes. There's a pizza place there that I think is called Peace on Earth Pizza or something to that effect. And fans will frequently be looking at the tracker and figuring out when their favorite musher is coming in, and will order pizza from this place to be delivered out to the checkpoint sled side to their favorite mushers. So anyway, Jake was saying that basically if Nick wants to, he could take 3 long runs from Unalakleet into Nome. So splitting up the run to White Mountain into 2 runs, and then doing a long run from White Mountain into Nome. Or he could do 4 runs, so making the run to White Mountain 3 slightly shorter runs, and still be able to maintain his lead and be ahead of Mitch.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm sorry if you can hear my computer going crazy. It's not authenticating a password, so I apologize for the noise. I think that he may be onto something there, but I also see that my neighbor Matt Failer is coming up pretty hot and heavy too, which is awesome because he trained on our trails, the same hill that took you out, Alex.
I like to call that Hubris Hill, where I was getting too cocky going up.
We're going to put a sign out there, but Matt trains on that same hill all season long, so you've got some camaraderie here going on for your little trip that you took with us.
Yeah, and it's I think it's also important that even though it does seem at this point like the race is Nick's to lose, there's a pretty long time that he has to go. He has more than 250 miles in order to get to Nome, and as you know, and as you know better than I do, but as people who've watched this race for a while certainly know, really anything can happen in these last couple hundred miles.
Well, absolutely. But one thing, too, that all of Nick's fans are going to remind us is he's won every race he's been in this season.
Right. He's kind of been almost unstoppable. Dallas Seavey used to talk about building a machine with his dogs, and it seems like Nick has really built a sled dog machine this year and has just been absolutely amazing in all of the mid-distance races.
Yeah, and, one can only speculate. I mean, I saw that Dallas was coming in 4th yesterday in Finnmark Slopin', and I know I don't say that right, into one of the checkpoints. He was 4th. His dogs looked super happy. They looked healthy. They looked well-rested coming into the checkpoint. I'm just wondering, if he had stayed in Iditarod this year, what that would have done to Pettit's race. I mean, I'm sure Mitch is giving him a good competition, but I think it might have been Nick's race either way.
It could be. Nick's team has just been so strong in all of the races that he's won, that he's been in this year.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other small things going on that we wanted to mention. Before we went on the air, you mentioned we had talked last night about Eagle Island, which was downgraded from, I guess, a full-fledged checkpoint where people could take their 8-hour rest to a hospitality stop, I believe is the term that they used. And there was a nice article about it on KTUU about Eagle Island.
So basically, this little blip came up today about Eagle Island, and it was a nice little story. So due to the bad flying weather on Friday, Eagle Island checkpoint had to be closed for the 8-hour layovers for mushers traveling up the Yukon River. Despite the relegation to a hospitality stop, a small group of volunteers waited patiently to welcome the mushers with open arms. Steve Conatser, has a strong connection to the Eagle Island checkpoint. His parents moved to the isolated location in 1975, building a cabin and living there for decades. Until 2006, a member of the Conatser family lived at Eagle Island throughout the year, waiting for mushers to travel up the river and welcoming them with Alaskan hospitality. Since we've lived out here year-round, it was kind of the first we were exposed to people, and it was kind of a sign of spring, says Conatser. Mushers who arrived at Eagle Island were treated to the sight of some beautiful flowers in the snow that just seemed to sprout up overnight, joked Conatser. A sign, as Conatser describes, of the work that goes into making a remote checkpoint a home away from home for dog teams heading to Nome. How cool is that?
I think that is one of my favorite stories of the Iditarod this year. And, you know, we talk a lot about how these little villages really just put their all into hosting the teams and coming out and providing for the teams. And it is great to see that spirit is continuing at Eagle Island, even though it's been downgraded from a full-fledged checkpoint. So it really just goes to show how important the spirit of the Iditarod is for all of these little villages.
Hey, you know, talk about leaving the light on. I know that any musher, I don't care how weathered and how rookie you are, you're going to appreciate seeing those flowers on the side of the hill in the snow. You know, that's just going to put a smile on your face. It's going to re-energize you and make you feel like, yep, I'm going to get there. You know, because that long stretch that we talked about yesterday, the 120 miles, that's a long stretch.
Yeah.
Not seeing something joyful like some flowers, of all things.
Yeah, and that, you know, it sort of ties in with another tradition on the Iditarod Trail, which is that every year there is something called the Widow's Lamp that is hung on the Burled Arch in Nome, and that stays there until the last musher comes in. And then when the last musher comes in, they take the lamp down and they extinguish it, and that's the official end of the Iditarod. And that kind of goes back to the the old tradition of leaving lamps out in these remote lodges when people were coming in at night so that they would be able to find their way to the lodge and be able to find their way to hospitality.
Absolutely, and I think that brings us back to what we were talking about yesterday about that romanticism kind of fading away. So this gave me a little spark to show that the romanticism is actually still there. So very good job, Conatser family.
Yeah, and you know there's a nice picture on the KTUU article of the flowers as the trail is coming in, and you see the flowers in the foreground, and it's just must be a lovely sight when you're coming into Eagle Island.
I bet, yeah, I bet it is. So who is our feature story today?
So our musher profile today is another rookie, Brett Brueggemann from Montana. And Brett is one of these people who has a very special reason for running the Iditarod. When he was growing up, he played football in high school and in college. He has 3 kids, 3 sons, and his first 2 sons played football in high school, and so it's very, very much a sporting family. His 3rd son, whose name is Spencer, was born with a congenital defect so that in one of his legs the muscles do not develop properly. So on one of his legs is perfectly fine in terms of musculature, but the second leg just never is able to develop many muscles. and he tried playing, Pop Warner football and football when he was younger, but starting when he was about 11, he realized that his condition made it basically impossible for him to continue playing football. So he and Spencer and his dad, Brett, were looking for something that they could do that would be a sport that would enable him to continue doing sports and competing and participating, but wouldn't require as much leg strength as traditional sports like football or soccer or baseball. And one day, his son Spencer was reading a Jack London book and decided that he wanted to try dog sledding. And Brett, who is a dentist and has a dental practice in Montana, got a few dogs. They started learning how to run dogs, got some help from Rick Swenson and Jesse Royer, and then got 10 Huskies, started doing some of their own breeding. They now have a kennel that is called Skinny Leg Kennel. That has 40 dogs, and Brett started running some qualifying races, mostly in the lower 48. And his son also gets out on the runners and helps him care for the dogs and train the dogs. And they were both in the Montana Race to the Sky about a month and a half ago. And in the Race to the Sky, there's, as is the case with a lot of sort of mid-distance races, there's a longer version and a shorter version. So there's a 300-miler, and Brett finished fourth in the 300-miler. And then there's also a 100-mile race for Race to the Sky. And Spencer competed with some of their younger dogs in the 100-mile version of this race and also finished in fourth. So he is up here now, up there in Alaska, running his first Iditarod, Brett. And he said that one of the reasons that he really got into sled dog racing was that it was a way of being able to do something and bring himself closer to his son, and also to spread awareness for this disease. Brett took his 24 at Takatna. His team had a little bit of a bug that was going around, so he chose to take his 24 a little bit earlier than I think he was planning on it, to just to get his dogs feeling well. They left. They're now still doing well. He's very solidly in the middle of the pack. I believe he is somewhere around 45th place at the moment. He's on that long trek between out of Grayling, and is doing extremely well. And I love stories like this because I love learning about reasons why people are doing the Iditarod. And this is his son is up in Alaska handling for him, and Spencer says that he wants to run the Iditarod at some point in the future as well. And, there's a lot of reasons why people run Iditarod. Sometimes they run it to raise awareness for various things. Sometimes they run it because they've had some sort of personal injury or illness and they want to overcome that. And sometimes they run it in order to celebrate, teachers or veterans or something like that. It is very, very inspiring to me when someone has a personal reason like this to run the Iditarod, and something that really brings him closer to his family.
Absolutely. It's nice when somebody does it for awareness, whether it's their own personal family member or not, because this is something that I'm sure a lot of our listeners probably don't know about.
And there's, as we say a lot when we're doing our Iditarod coverage, there's a lot of attention that's paid to the people at the front of the pack. There's almost no attention generally paid to the people at the back of the pack. And I think that's their stories always speak to me, and I think that's why that's one big reason why we've chosen to focus on people who are rookies, people who are less well known, and people who I think have very interesting stories.
Well, absolutely, and I know that Robert would agree with you 100% in that aspect. That's something that when he first started doing mushing radio in, oh my goodness, 2008, maybe 2009. It was before we moved here. He started doing the show, and it's always something I remember. He and I used to do it, and I always picked on, hey, let's focus on the rookies. Let's focus on the back of the Packers. Let's find that story that is worthy of somebody learning something about. I'm really curious to know. I mean, contact sports are one thing, but dog mushing, in my opinion, Alex, and I think you'll agree now, is a contact sport.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if they put him in a special leg brace or something like that to help with the fatigue. I mean, riding on the runners for 100 miles. And Robert has done the Race to the Sky. That's a no-joke technical trail in a lot of parts.
Right.
So you were on what we would consider beginning to intermediate technical trails, okay, here behind our house. I'm just wondering how he's managing any pain management or fatigue management, mostly, I would imagine, with the muscle loss. How does he manage that 100 miles on the runner?
I would guess, and I'm not sure, but I would guess that he has a sled that allows him to sit down for part of it, so that it's not 100 miles of standing.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, it's not you're not a passenger. You are very much part of the team, and most mushers will say you're usually the weakest part of the team because these dogs are just phenomenal and just want to go.
Right. Well, and I'm just the handler, as you know, just the handler, and my legs are covered in bruises from the dogs jumping on me and hooking up, and I got knocked down by one of the students when they went out on Willow Lake yesterday, and the gang line caught the back of my knee, and I've got a bruise that goes all the way around my leg. You know, well, I'm just the handler, Alex. You know, so you saw what I do.
One more thing about Brett. His two lead dogs are named Scabs and Browning.
Hey, yeah.
And he described Browning as a very, very intelligent dog who is just able to find the trail in all kinds of conditions, and says that Scabs is just fearless and much less bright. Doesn't always find the trail, but having the two of them working together is very, very effective. So you need both the totally fearless dog who's able to, to keep going no matter what, and the really, really smart dog who can steer you in exactly the right direction.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So, congratulations on them being here. On the Skinny Lake Sled Dog Kennel for being here in Alaska. And, when I do want to add, anytime dogs come from the lower 48 or outside of the country to Alaska, especially the rookie teams, they always seem to catch some kind of bug. And that's just a normal, typical thing. You're in a different area. Your dogs aren't used to anything here.
I believe that is all we've got for tonight, unless you have something else you want to talk about.
I think that's good for tonight. I mean, once they get into Unicolete, things do kind of slow down just a little bit, and we'll see a lot of changes, I think, in the next 2 days as far as who's pushing through. I think that Chase pack is going to do a lot of changing in the next 48 hours. I think the back of the pack is going to do a lot of changing in the next 48 hours. Weather here is looking good. We're in the mid-20s during the day, at least on my side of the mountain range. We're in the negative single digits at night, so -4, -3. Those are nice, crisp temperatures that the dogs like to run in at this time of year. So hopefully they're catching the same type of weather on the other side of the mountain range. And if they are, it's going to be a fast-paced race still.
Absolutely. And as we said earlier, there is still a third of the race to go. So it is very possible that dramatic things can happen, because they usually do in the last third. If people have any feedback that they would like to give us, any questions, any things that are unclear, or suggestions for future show topics, please hit us up on social media. I am very active on Twitter at Coldfoot Films. Robert is off on his expedition, but he will get back to you as well. He is at Robert Forto. We both are fairly active on Facebook as well, so you can find us on Facebook. Please subscribe to this podcast at Dogworks. Search Dogworks Radio at Apple Podcasts, and please leave a review. It helps us move up in the rankings, which is very important. You can find this show also on dogworksradio.com. And for Sunday evening, I want to thank my co-host this evening, Michelle Forto. I'm Alex Stein, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.